make you feel like, you know, it's not all bad.
People say to me, you always seem to be having a good time. And you know what? You're right.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
Tonight, Eye on America, the healing power of home, a new approach for aging veterans in their final years. Then, as America celebrates its birthday, Norah O'Donnell gets a rare look at a piece of history directly tied to it.
Is President Biden considering stepping down?
Absolutely not. And you heard, I believe, directly from the campaign as well.
Any doubt in your mind, President Biden has the vigor and mental capability to carry on with this office?
In my interactions with him, I have no doubt.
If I don't agree with you and your political views, if we're not in the same party, that's okay.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. The White House is still in damage control. Let's check the president's agenda for this day. All hands on deck staff meeting, face-to-face with Democratic governors at the White House, and a vow to stay in the race for the presidency. All of this comes as concerns mount within the Democratic Party about whether the president can defeat former President Trump in November. Those concerns rising as a new post-debate CBS News poll shows a shift in key battleground states away from the president. That's where we start our coverage with Weijia Jiang at the White House and Nicole Killion on Capitol Hill. Weijia, this was not a typical day before 4th of July slumber day at the White House.
And Major, it is not going to be a typical holiday in any sense for President Biden because, as you mentioned, he is now scrambling for support of his own party. Even though he is the presumptive Democratic nominee, we are seeing more calls for him to resign from members of his own party on Capitol Hill. We know that donors have concerns. We know that supporters have concerns, leading to an article from the New York Times that said that President Biden was weighing whether to stay in the race or not. And Major, that prompted a very forceful response today from the White House pushing back and from President Biden himself, who had a phone call with campaign staffers in which he said, I want to quote this because it is very clear. He says, I am the nominee of the Democratic Party. No one is pushing me out. I'm not leaving. But he has a very busy few days ahead trying to convince people who have now questioned their support of him that they should continue to back him as the nominee. So no, Major, he is very busy in the coming days. And, you know, you almost look at every single one of the events he has on his schedule as a test to the American public to see if he can prove that the debate performance was just a one-off. He has campaign trips coming up. He has a major sit-down interview on television coming up. He has a press conference next week coming up. And so you can imagine the pressure that is on him right now.
And Weijia, fair to say this dominated today's White House briefing?
It did, Major, and of course, we asked whether there was the possibility that he is going to step down, and the press secretary told me that he's not even thinking about it. Take a listen. Is there anything, Karine, that would change his mind?
Look, I cannot lay out something that would change the president's mind. He has been very clear, and he's going to continue to build on the unprecedented record that he's been able to lay out for the American people. That's his focus right now.
Major, I also asked that given the groundswell of concerns from Democrats, from donors, from supporters, whether or not it was responsible of the president, whether he owed it to the American public to reflect about whether he should step down or stay in the race. And that is not even something she would entertain, saying that he is here to stay and he is focused on turning the page.
Weijia, thank you very much. Please stay with us. I want to bring in Nicole Killion now. Of course, this is a drama playing out at the White House, but Capitol Hill is not indifferent to this conversation. Many House Democrats have begun to weigh in. Nicole, what's the latest today?
Well, the latest is that at this hour, we know that House Democratic leaders are convening a call. That's Leader Jeffries, Caucus Chair Pete Aguilar, among others. And so this is a call that has no set agenda, we're told, and is strictly a leadership call. But of course, this comes as we have kind of heard this bubbling up from rank and file members, the aides, and others here on Capitol Hill expressing concern about the president's path forward and his viability. That being said, there are equally a number of members, too, who continue to stand by the president. But one thing is clear. There is a lot of frustration, certainly in the aftermath of this debate, how it could impact battleground polling numbers in critical down ballot district races. And so that's kind of what everyone is watching carefully and closely as this all plays out.
And Nicole, the viewers can see the CBS News polling results. They're not a massive shift, but a shift toward former President Trump. And also, I'm beginning to detect, as I listen to House Democrats talk about this, and I wonder if you're picking it up as well, that this is not just about the prospects of the Biden-Harris ticket. It is about the prospects of Senate Democrats, House Democrats, and the implications for the ballot nationwide, not just the president.
Well, absolutely. It's across the board. I mean, at the end of the day, most of these members, certainly all of them in the House, are having to run for re-election. And then, of course, a number of critical Senate races as well that could potentially affect the balance of power here in Congress. I do think it's worth noting, though, that we continue to see some members now, a second Democrat coming forward, Raul Grijalva of Arizona, who just a short time ago told the New York Times that he does believe that the president should leave the race, saying that if he is the candidate, I'm going to support him. But I think this is an opportunity to look elsewhere. So, of course, Grijalva coming out not long after Texas Democrat Lloyd Doggett. There is this big question of, is the dam going to break among Democrats? But again, as I mentioned, it's still a bit of a wait and see approach. We will see what comes out of this leadership call. There are some of the viewpoint, hey, let's see how the president does in his next couple of events. In this interview that is planned for the weekend, of course, members are expected to be back here in full, in both chambers. So there is, some sentiment among some members that maybe the president should come up to the Hill. Maybe he should, talk to members face to face. So there's a lot of, again, discussions behind closed doors. But that being said, the fact that we now have a second Democrat coming forward is worth noting.
Nicole Killian, thank you very much. Weege, I want to go back to you at the White House. Of course, this is not just about a campaign. It's also about continuing to keep the White House focused. And the chief of staff had an all-staff call about that. What does that tell us?
Well, it tells us that there are people here working in this White House that are impacted by this, of course, as you can imagine. And so that is why he told them to try to tune out the noise. He said, put your head down and do the work, but lift your head up and be proud of everything that this administration has accomplished, because there is a morale issue here as well, Major, as you can imagine. If your leader is undergoing the kind of scrutiny and calls for him to step aside, that's going to impact the entire staff. And so, he also said, reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm here to talk. It almost seemed like a therapy session for the people here. And I should say that just about in an hour and a half also, Major, the president is going to be hosting a group of Democratic governors, again, as we talk about trying to shore up that support from anywhere he can at this point.
Weege Jiang at the White House, Nicole Killian on Capitol Hill. Thank you very, very much. What just a week ago seemed unimaginable is now quite imaginable. Democrats in the House and elsewhere, some of them openly questioning who their party's nominee should be. Straight ahead, Vermont Democratic Senator Peter Welch joins us. You are streaming America Decides.
Coming up, our series. Wait a minute. Tom, is that you working the camera?
Keep leaning out of your close-up.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
That desired farm, it's a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
And if you know Joe Biden, you know him as a senator and as vice president, he's very sensitive to how people feel, right? And he's very aware of that.
What was once a whisper in Democratic circles over the president's ability to win re-election and serve a full second term is now something much different, and it's not very pleasant. Let's bring in Vermont Democratic Senator Peter Welch. Senator, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining us. Simply put, do you want President Biden to be the Democratic nominee in 2024?
I want him to make that decision. You know, what you have at the lead-in, that President Biden is sensitive to people, and more than that, he is sensitive to the needs of the country. And I am absolutely certain that President Biden is reviewing a situation in light of the very bad debate, and he's going to make a decision that is not about him, that is about what's best for our country. And we all know what the challenges are, but I have confidence that President Biden is going to make the right decision.
If he were to call you, Senator, and ask your advice, what would it be?
You know, I would defer to him. We love Joe Biden, okay? He has, in Vermont, gave him the highest vote margin in the entire country. We love who he is. We love how he loves his country and loves his family. We love what he's done. He kept us from Trump. He's the only one who can do it. And all of that respect we have for what he's done and how he's done it over his decades in office, we're going to defer to him to make the decision. And it's very clear that the White House is very aware of the implications of what happened at that debate in the aftermath. I mean, President Biden did go in behind, and the age issue was the question. And instead of alleviating the concerns, Thursday night intensified the concerns. The president, I'm sure, is aware of that, as is his team. So I'm going to have confidence that the president will make the decision that's best for the country.
Senator, you say you love the president. That is a sentiment shared by many, many Democrats. Is this time a time for tough love?
Well, sure. I mean, the president is, I'm sure, hearing from people who are very close to him, and that would include friends and possibly family. And they're wrestling with the reality that there was a setback that was significant. It wasn't just a normal bad debate. There were questions that were raised about his physical ability, and that's just got to be acknowledged. I think the campaign initially made a mistake when a few of the campaign folks were dismissive of Democrats who were asking among themselves the same question that the president was asking. But bottom line here, the existential challenge for the Democratic Party is to protect the country from another Trump presidency. And that is far more important than the circumstances or the situation for any individual. So every single one of us, from the president to local Democratic board committee people, we all have to be asking what's best to help us guarantee that we will do our best to protect America from another Trump presidency. And no one is more concerned about that than Joe Biden.
In that light, I want to quote to you a fellow hardy New Englander, Jared Golden, a member of the House, an institution I know you respect and revere, from Maine, said yesterday in an op-ed, quote, "While I don't plan to vote for him, Donald Trump is going to win, and I'm okay with that."
Well, I'm not okay with that. I am not okay with that. We cannot have a Trump presidency, particularly in the light of that catastrophic Supreme Court ruling that overturned what has been the tradition in our country since it was founded, and that is that no person is above the law. Our whole revolution was to get rid of a king. And what the Supreme Court is saying is that the president is a king. And if they do things that are clearly illegal, but, quote, in their official capacity, it's okay. It's not okay. Trump thinks it's okay. So no, Jared, you're wrong. It is not okay to have Donald Trump back in the presidency.
You know as well as I do, Senator, that there is no mechanism for the Democratic National Committee to eject President Biden if he wants to be the nominee for the party. He's earned the delegates. He won the primaries. He won the caucuses. So there's not much time for this consideration to be given. And when the White House, as it did today, said the president's going to evaluate the next couple of days, you and I both know who's going to be the evaluator. Him. So isn't this decision already made?
He has the right. The decision is made. And the only one who can, because he's our nominee, all but ratified in Chicago. But he's the one who has the authority to make the decision, and I trust him that he'll make the right decision. You know, by the way, one of the things that's so terrific is all these names that are out there about people who might be contenders in the event that the president steps aside. They all want to run on the Biden program. Joe Biden has unified the Democratic Party from Bernie Sanders to Joe Manchin. You know, it's another reason why there's such immense affection and respect for President Biden, what he's done to unify this party. So he'll decide, and I am one who has real confidence that he'll make that decision, assessing what's best for our country.
How would you evaluate this race if it were Kamala Harris leading the ticket as opposed to President Biden?
I'm not going to get into the speculation on this because, as I said, Major, we're unified. So you've got all these folks whose names are being mentioned, including the vice president, and they're going to be running on the Biden agenda. So this is a decision that then ultimately, if we get to that, delegates are going to have to make. And the various folks who are interested in this office are going to have to get out and present their goals and their aspirations. But, you know, she's terrific and has done a great job, a remarkable person.
Vermont Democratic Senator Peter Welch. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We and others in political journalism talk a fair amount about polling, but who are the people behind those polls? Our Anthony Salvanto traveled the country to speak directly to them. He'll join us to share what he found next. You are streaming America Decides.
On our places. Yes, right, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team. Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing, bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else.
This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
Or you can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to America Decides. Thanks for hanging out with us. A new CBS Reports documentary reveals Americans' unfiltered, keep track of that word, it's going to come back, their unfiltered views on issues quite likely to shape the outcome of the 2024 election. Among those, state of American democracy and access and reachability of the American dream. Our polling director, Anthony Salvanto, you can see him right there. He went out into the field with our CBS Reports team to talk to the voters behind our very own CBS News surveys. Here's what a woman who immigrated to the U.S. as a child had to say about politics and how it can and often does influence human relationships.
If I don't agree with you and your political views, if we're not in the same party, that's okay. I don't think of that person as evil or bad or they're not going to be my friend or they're. It's just a political point of view that's different from mine.
Anthony Salvanto joins us now from our New York studio. The traveling man, Anthony Salvanto, what was it like? What did you encounter?
Hey there, Major. Yeah, you know, no screen here, right? No touch screen, no percentages. What we wanted to do was get out of the studio and go talk to the people who take the polls or others like them and ask, what got you to the opinion that you hold? And what I learned and what I'm excited to share with this is that, like the clip you just showed, Americans are willing to entertain different ideas, different complex ideas, and they're willing to have conversations even when they disagree. And don't let me sugarcoat this. We have definite disagreements here. But when you see how people got there and why they think what they think in their own words, you start to understand there's a real value to that listening and going deeper. And that's what we're going to bring here. You've heard someone who say, you know, it's not so much about the parties, it's about the elites. You're going to hear someone say, as a mom, they were concerned about what their kids were learning. You're going to hear somebody say they were worried because speaking out, they thought their neighbors or someone in their town might get mad and come after or take action against them because they weren't sure they could express their beliefs. All of those emotions are built in there, and it really reveals a lot about where we are as a country, Major.
And Anthony, I've watched the documentary. It's wonderful to see these voters express themselves on their terms. And one of the things that struck me is a reminder of my own encounters for now going on 30 years with voters. Issues come and go in Washington, and things rise and fall on an intensity scale here. New York picks up on it a certain degree, too. But voters deal with issues and remember them on their terms and on their timetable. And something that may be topical right now in Washington isn't necessarily topical to a voter when you encounter them. They may remember something and really care about something that we thought was 6 months ago, but to them, it's very current.
And it's really all in service of these larger ideas of, can we have a democracy, which means having a voice. That's one thing you'll hear common through all of this. It means getting the American dream, which means feeling like you're going to get some security, feeling like you can get ahead. All of the politics and all the back and forth in Washington is all, in their minds, in service of those things. Look, there's clearly big issues going on right now. And look, we'll hear from people who voiced concerns about Joe Biden's age, voiced concerns about what they think another Trump administration would mean for the country. But again, to your point, always in their terms, how they got there so that you can hear, understand. Some folks you'll agree with, some folks you won't, but you'll see what in their life experience led them to think that.
Anthony, very quickly, would you say you encountered more or less anxiety about the future than you expected?
Frankly, there's plenty of anxiety out there. I was heartened by the fact that people do not dislike each other as much as you might think from watching politics every day. But the fact is, there are issues and concerns out there, and at least it gives people us a chance to listen as people express them, Major.
Anthony Salvanto, thank you so very, very much. The half-hour documentary, America Unfiltered, I told you that word would come back, America Unfiltered, The Voices Behind the Polls, that airs tomorrow, July 4th at 5 p.m. Eastern. It is followed by an America Decides panel about what this all means for the election in November. Rallying the troops and reassuring the party that Biden is up for the job, our political panel takes a closer look at the current White House messaging, how muscular it is or isn't as concerns about the president's age continue to swirl. That's next. You're streaming America Decides.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail.
What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024? Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
an original documentary from CBS reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
It can help us with medical discovery, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to America Decides. Take this in. Both the White House and the Biden-Harris re-election campaign held all-staff meetings today. If you think that's normal the day before the 4th of July, think again. They're doing this because they're contending with what can only be described as rampant, barely controllable political fallout after last week's presidential debate. Sources tell us President Biden acknowledged in the last few days that this has been tough. He had his call with the campaign staff saying that he, quote, unequivocally is running for re-election. And he said, with some degree of confidence, he will defeat former President Trump. Tom Lobianco and Kadia Goba are here with me now at the table to dig into all of this. Tom is the co-founder and a national political reporter for 24 Site News. Kadia is a politics reporter for Semaphore. Great to have you here. I want to play you a soundbite from the Wayback Machine that goes all the way back to 2020, March of 2020 in Detroit. It's then candidate Joe Biden. Let's listen.
I view myself as a bridge, not as anything else. There's an entire generation of leaders you saw stand behind me. They are the future of this country.
Kadia, I view myself as a bridge, not as anything else. There's an entire generation of leaders. What happened to that bridge?
You know, in addition to the, botched debate that happened the other day, I think there's a general consensus around that Joe Biden didn't do well. This is one of the concerns that donors in particular are bringing up, because they feel like, you know what, we've been contributing to a hardy group of younger Democrats, waiting to take their turn, and now we're at this point where this older gentleman just won't move out of the way. And he's flailing and could possibly lose the election. These are some of the comments I heard privately, and you'll probably start to hear them publicly.
And, Tom, it wasn't a pledge. Joe Biden never said, you can check the record, ladies and gentlemen. He never said, I'm going to be a one-term president. He never forswore the possibility of running for re-election. Let's be clear about that. But that language, view myself as a bridge, there's also, quotes the New York Times, a transitional figure, that's now coming back in the minds of some Democrats in a kind of haunting way, is it not?
And the way that Biden and his team, worked on the primary process this time around to ensure that everything went so perfectly for him. I mean, we all
moving South Carolina first.
Yeah. I mean, we remember the photos of Dean Phillips sitting so sad and alone up in New Hampshire. What that did was you didn't have a chance to test anybody out. I mean, this is why we're hearing all this talk right now about Kamala Harris could come forth. Maybe we need to see some more of her. It's interesting. You think back not too long ago to when Obama used to keep Biden underneath them, and a very standard practice in White Houses. But yeah, and as Kadia wrote in her piece just recently with this the donor freak out that's going on, people are casting about looking for talent, and we haven't seen it because he kept a lid on it for so long.
In these conversations among donors, Kadia, look, yes, they have some influence, but they know their influence is limited. The sitting president of the United States, the leader of the Democratic Party, He has all the delegates he needs. And yes, you can say, I'm not going to stroke you a check, but what implications does that have for a House Democrat or a Senate Democrat? And if you literally feel that Biden can't win, don't you want to be protective of those other Democrats down ballot? I mean, the money's going to flow. It's just, how do you get there?
Yeah, I think that's probably what donors are thinking about right now. Maybe removing a lot of, patronage to Joe Biden and maybe settling in on trying to secure the House race of the House at this point. The Senate.
It's a narrow majority. Everyone knows that. It's on a razor's edge. And if you can win the House, then you have at least some institutional mechanism by which to challenge if there is a second term for a Trump presidency.
But I also want to point out that I think some donors didn't have, personal one-on-one contact with Joe Biden. So they were very shocked to see him on a debate stage like that and probably looking at political consultants like, well, what have you been doing with my money? Like, what has been transpiring around here?
Tom, any thoughts about that?
Well, the political industrial complex reigns supreme. It does.
And by that, you mean people who are built into this campaign, who are going to get paid by this campaign and have no incentive to question the campaign.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
That tight-knit group around him, longtime operatives, Nita Dunn, Ricchetti, Donilon.
Steve Ricchetti, yes. Yeah. Tom Donilon.
And look, I mean, if
Mike
we've been
Donilon,
talking about this.
Not Tom, Mike.
2 weeks ago, we would have been talking about it in terms of the loyal team he has had around him for forever. But this is flipped on its head now. I mean, this sounds to me like all the discussions that were happening after Access Hollywood in 2016 for the Republicans. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is like Trump-era level chaos for Democrats. And it is astounding to see. I mean, Biden, so much of this was predicated on Biden will not be the story. Trump will be the story. The guy convicted of 34 felonies will be the story. How could he not be the story? And we just found out.
And Kadia, I want to let you know, because producer just told me in my ear, a fundraising email from the Biden-Harris campaign just went out, and in it says, under the president's quotation, I'm running. Okay, there you go.
It's happening.
And let me just say this, that doesn't settle it, folks. Not for this weekend, at least. But doesn't it feel to you, Kadia, that this has to be buttoned up in no uncertain terms, no later than next Monday?
Oh, it has to be. I mean, the election is nearing. They just, as you pointed out, they don't really have a plan for an alternative. That's part of the issue here. Mm-hmm. But I can tell you that donors are really persistent about wanting a change at the top of the ticket. Whether it happens is a whole different story. I imagine we'll see what members of Congress come out. I know 2 members of Congress have already come out and said that they want to replace Joe Biden. However, I think people are probably looking at the Schumers of the world or the Hakeem Jeffries or the Nancy Pelosi's of the world to see what they're going to do and how they'll move forward. If Democrats are known to stick together, I foresee nothing changing.
Tom, let's evaluate the perspective that the Trump campaign has on all this. It's been noted to me several times, well, the former president hasn't said much. He doesn't have to say anything.
Remarkable to see Donald Trump not saying anything. Now, he is tweeting or truthing or whatever it is, and he is putting out statements, but even those are cogent. I mean, we are not hearing about sharks and electrocution right now.
Right, except for the reposting of something calling for military tribunals yesterday and trials for Liz Cheney. That's not cogent. That's wacky stuff. Doesn't need to happen. Ought not to happen in a presidential campaign. I think everyone would agree. But nevertheless, for Republicans, this is just watch them writhe in agony.
Yeah. We had on the 24 Site podcast, we had Sean Spicer on, just published. And it was interesting because he said that he does not see this as a cakewalk right now for Trump, and that you still have to be worried about putting away Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. Now, what's fascinating about that is that it does revert to the blue wall, the Rust Belt. Mm-hmm. A couple weeks ago, we'd been talking about Arizona, Nevada pushing down Hispanic, Latino communities down in the South. But in a way, and this gets into the whole Veep stakes calculation, right, when you do when you roll this out, I personally think, and this is my reporting, that you don't see it until the week of the convention, maybe the Saturday before. Everything else is just a tease but it does, the blue wall, the Rust Belt, we're at 2016 replay.
Tom LoBianco, Kadia Goba, thanks so very much. First Lady campaigned in the battleground state of Michigan. While appearing at the opening of a campaign office in Traverse City, Joe Biden acknowledged growing concerns about the president's ability to serve.
Because there's a lot of talk out there, let me repeat what my husband has said plainly and clearly. Joe is the Democratic nominee, and he is going to beat Donald Trump just like he did in 2020.
Earlier in the day, the First Lady appeared in Middleville, Michigan, to highlight summer nutrition programs for children and visited a military-related summer camp. Just yesterday, she visited Pennsylvania to court Latino voters.
I think it would be unfair and inappropriate to try and diagnose something.
Dr. Anthony Fauci is sharing his thoughts about President Biden's debate performance. We'll have more from my interview with him next. You are streaming America Decides.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Nations are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's gonna be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm gonna remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was gonna be born, he was only gonna live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift, stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to America Decides. Dr. Anthony Fauci is sharing lessons he's learned from a decades-long career in public health. I sat down with Dr. Fauci for my podcast, The Takeout, to discuss his new best-selling book, On Call, as well as President Biden's debate performance. You write in the book, Dr. Fauci, about regular interactions with President Biden, and you talk about frequent phone calls you got from him, his level of curiosity, the depth of his understanding of the underlying issues related to COVID and everything else, his curiosity, the questions. Simple question. Did your interactions with the president in any way resemble what you saw in the debate performance last Thursday?
No, I mean, obviously not. You know, I don't want to comment about what happened that night, but to me, it just looked like a bad night because my interaction with him was what I describe in the book, and what happened even subsequent to what I described in the book after I got out. Uh, he's very probing in his questions, very analytical, very calm about things. When you go into brief him, Major, you better really know your topic because he's going to ask you very relevant questions. And he's very reflective on things and just doesn't jump out with conclusions or anything, but is very analytic. So my interactions with him, I have to say, have been very, very positive and in every way.
Did you see the debate?
I did.
Did anything about that, what you saw, medically alarm you?
I can't say. I think it would be inappropriate to say that, Major, because when you're just looking at someone on a one-shot basis, you just don't know what could happen. Did he have a bad cold? Did he take an antihistamine to make him, groggy or what have you? We don't know what went on. And I think it would be unfair and inappropriate to try and diagnose something from just a 90-minute clip.
Any doubt in your mind President Biden has the vigor and mental capability to carry on with this office?
In my interactions with him, I have no doubt. And I can only speak in my own interactions with him.
Jerome Adams, who you talk about in your book, served with Surgeon General during the Trump administration, was on this program, said much the same things that you've said just recently about COVID vaccinations and the efforts. But he also said, look, there are things that still rub me the wrong way. And he remembers, and many of those who are sympathetic to former President Trump remember comments of which I'm going to communicate to you. I'm going to read you a headline, September 5th from Politico 2020. Harris says she wouldn't trust Trump on any vaccine released before the election. Jerome Adams said there was a partisan aspect even before the vaccine became available in the heat of that 2020 campaign that wasn't helpful, that politicized this whole idea. Do you have any disagreement with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think any politicization of that is unfortunate, regardless of where the politicization comes from, Major. I've always felt that way. We've got to make sure we just stick with the science and make recommendations purely based on public health principles and scientific principles and not politicize any aspect of this.
You talk in the book with some frequency about former President Trump's relentless optimism and his desire that people around him in this crisis sound optimistic. Impediment or advantage?
Impediment, because it was unrealistic. I mean, that's the thing. In the very beginning, when we, as part of the team, the coronavirus task force, which was led by Deb Burks, when we went to him and said, we're having a tsunami of cases. So what we've got to do is we've got to really have physical distancing and have that 15-day flattening the curve and extend it to 30 days. He, to his credit, accepted that because he was hoping that, like influenza, and as I described in the memoir, Major, he kept on confusing a bit COVID and influenza. He wanted it desperately to act like influenza, which means it peaks in the winter months and then come March and April, it'll go away. So he kept on saying it's going to disappear like magic. And I kept on telling him, we have no evidence it's going to disappear like magic. But he was looking at the economy and he was looking at the election cycle and he wanted it to go away. And when it didn't go away like magic, he started to say things that were scientifically not true.
Any advice you have for those in your profession about how to balance mental health, the internal emotions, and the obligations of the work?
Well, yeah, I mean, as I've told so many of my friends and colleagues who ask, I'm not exactly the poster child for a normal work-life balance, as my family often reminds me. But my advice to people in the medical profession, but in any profession that has a high degree of stress and tension, you've really got to take care of yourself, because if you wear yourself down And you may wind up having the paradoxical effect of not doing your job as well as you can.
President Biden has awarded the Medal of Honor to 2 Union soldiers more than 160 years after they took part in a daring Civil War covert operation. President Biden awarded the medals this afternoon during a ceremony at the White House with descendants of Private Philip Shadrach and George Wilson. On April 12, 1862, the men drove a locomotive deep into Confederate territory, destroying railroad tracks and telegraph lines along the way. This mission became known as the Great Locomotive Chase. The men are said to have driven the train 87 miles north before being captured and executed by Confederate soldiers. We're still over 100 days away from the U.S. presidential election, but across the pond, it's Britain's turn to decide. A preview of tomorrow's vote in the U.K. is next, right here on America Decides.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government that?
Why won't you say the word crisis?
You're not answering my question.
Is that scary?
Does that make sense?
What do you mean?
What does that mean in
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
What happened?
Why?
It's time for the CBS News Original 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has that glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh, really good.
Is it good? Mm-hmm. Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
So if we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail.
What do you say to those in your party? Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
When people say who's first to get in the morning, that would be me. Morning news matters because it sets the tone for your day, and it's a way of getting you started.
Day to day, that first draft of history, it happens right here.
We're going to uplift you. We're going to send you out your way.
We take you places, we teach you new things, and we make you feel like, you know, it's not all bad.
People say to me, you always seem to be having a good time. And you know what? You're right.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
Welcome back. Voters of the United Kingdom won't be celebrating the 4th of July tomorrow. That's not new. What is new is the voters will be heading to the polls. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is fighting to keep Conservatives in power, but the Labour Party, led by Keir Starmer, is widely expected to win enough seats to claim a parliamentary majority. If that happens, it'll be the first time in 14 years the two parties will have switched spots in the House of Commons. Lilia Luciano joins us now from London. So, Lilia, I'm sure you saw it. I've seen it. A tweet, or whatever we call it now, from the Prime Minister. Stop the supermajority. Vote Conservative on 4th July. That sort of concedes the point, doesn't it? Majority already going to swamp the Tories, and all that's left is staving off a supermajority. Doesn't sound very optimistic.
It's not optimistic at all, Major. I mean, Sunak also said there's a fight in the underdog, that the game isn't over until the final whistle goes. Mel Stride, who's a pensions and labor minister, basically conceded, too, and this is before people even went out to vote. There's millions of people voting, and we're hearing that kind of messaging. But the reality is that the final polls, the major polls, say that Labor will win the largest majority, hear this, for any party since 1832. I mean, conservatives are expected to lose 70% of the seats that they won 5 years ago. Back in 2019, they had 365 seats. They're projected to win just over 100 seats. Labor is projected to more than double the seats that they have out of a total of 650. Even some of the biggest names of the Conservative Party might lose their seats. So the prospects are not great for them. I mean, what I hear from people here and have been asking for the last couple of weeks that I've been around is, look, this is not even about Brexit. This is not even about the widening gap in inequality, not even about the economic shocks that people have undergone in the last 14 years that conservatives have been in power. This is about the scandals. There's been so many scandals leading up to having 5 different prime ministers in the last 8 years. And people, of course, are blaming the party that has remained in power for that time. There's also something that I find very interesting is that Keir Starmer has moved away from the left-wing socialist wing of his party, and found a great deal of success in moving towards the center, in appealing to people who are disenfranchised or disenamored or unenchanted, call it what you may, by the Conservatives, and might have not gone for a party, for the Labour Party as it was under Jeremy Corbyn, which was very much further to the left. They call him a flip-flopper. They say he is not shiny and new, that he's not charismatic, but somehow he's been able to establish something that we've seen, Major, not just in politics in Europe or in Latin America or in the U.S., but something that you hear a lot of pundits talk about, and it's the need for somebody in the center to not allow or let the far fringes of either movement or either parties really get the loudspeaker. And of course, coming back to the U.S., it's something that Biden stood for. But at this time, we'll see what this all means for U.S. politics.
I want to pick up on that observation about Keir Starmer refashioning the image, at least in his light, of what the Labour Party stands for. To the degree he has defined it, what's the agenda?
I mean, what he has been trying to say is, look, we need to remove the people who've been in power. And so I think part of the strategy and part of the analysis has been, even though he represented the far left, and he was very much a champion of Corbyn when he led the Labour Party, he's changed that stance because I think what he calculated, the estimate is that all you need to do first, the first and foremost biggest priority, was to remove conservatives from power, which is interesting because in the rest of Europe, I mean, what has been gaining momentum and speed and galvanizing voters has been those far-right movements. I mean, you would expect that if the UK were to follow the footsteps of, say, France, as we saw in that first round of voting for their parliamentary elections, you see Marine Le Pen's party win so sweepingly, if that's even a term, but have such a sweeping victory, that might here translate to somebody closer to that far right, closer to Trump, here being Nigel Farage, who represents the Reformist Party, smaller party. They have no seats in the Parliament, in the House and Commons, but what they do have is a great deal of support, 15% support among voters. And so perhaps that might grow, but I do think that it's interesting to watch this election and see somebody who stood for something that might have been seen as far left, as more fringe, move to the center and say, look, we need to change things, and the way to change things is to change who has that majority in the House of Commons, who is in power, and in this case is somebody who's not regarded as a very exciting leader by people here by any stretch of the imagination, but somebody who would just change what they fear the most, which is things maintaining in that same status quo where you've had all of these scandal politically and economically and instability overall under the Conservative Party.
Lilia,
Saying
very
that
quickly.
as a way because of the politics in the U.S. and all of these concerns about who, if not Biden, is there going to be a big a big contention or a big competition among other people? Well, in this case, it's not necessarily the most popular leader. It's just not the one that they don't want.
Lilia Luciano in London, thanks so very much.
Thanks.
That does it for today. We will be back with a special July 4th edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report with John Dickerson starts right now.
Welcome to the Daily Report for July 3rd, 2024. I'm John Dickerson. When in the course of human events have so many human events piled up on the eve of America's independence celebration? An incumbent president tries to reassure